Asking the right questions builds rapport, influences buyers, and seals the deal like nothing else. But asking the wrong questions, if you're doing it right now, it's absolutely 100% sinking your sales numbers like a 20-ton anchor. So in this video, we're going to take a look at 5 stupid sales questions that are costing you sales and cutting your chances of closing the deal off at the knees. Hi, my name is Will and I make selling simple. Right, in today's video, we're going to look at 5 downright stupid sales questions, and we're going to start with what we call the pitch preventer, which is going to stop any deal dead in the water. Then the value vampire, a surefire way to scare off prospects before the conversation has even started. Then the tone shifter. This one's a little bit more tricky because in just one single word, you can ruin your chances of getting the deal done. Number 4, the auto defense, which is a surefire way to set off your buyer's defenses at the drop of a hat. And finally, last but not least, we're going to cover the crappy closer. This question, this terrible, stupid question, gives away all of your control of the sales process and the deal and simply hands it over to fate. Clearly never a good thing. Now, qualifying leads and closing prospects are without a doubt 2 of the hardest parts of being a sales rep. Do you agree? Do you think that's fair? If you agree with this, well, you're in good company, because HubSpot found that 61% of reps reported that lead qualification was their biggest challenge, and another 36% of sales reps said their biggest challenge was closing the deal. But part of the difficulty in both cases is not knowing the right sales questions to ask. Questions that uncover hidden motivations that help you craft a perfect sales pitch, and questions that aid in spotting who's an ideal customer and who's going to be a major pain in the ass. But the problem with asking the wrong questions in the sales process is that it just tanks your sales. Bad questions can make you look like an idiot, a con man, or even just a waste of your lead's time. And even if you have the world's most groundbreaking, world-shatteringly amazing product, well, a single crappy question in your sales process is going to leave you struggling to meet your goals every month. But don't worry, I'm going to help you avoid that, because all you got to do is just don't use these questions that we're going to cover in this video. So the first question you've got to avoid is, hey, can I give you my pitch? Can I give you my pitch? Just hearing this one should make your neck hair stand on end. First off, don't call it a sales pitch. Don't use that word with your prospects. Nobody wants to be pitched. You don't want me pitching you on our training product. I don't want you pitching me on whatever you sell, especially when it comes down to sales, when a prospect knows that they're dealing with a salesperson. But beyond that, just the very structure of this question is setting you up for a troublesome power dynamic. Can you see why? Because what you're doing here, you're asking for permission, and doing so pushes the psychology and the dynamic of the conversation towards the sales lead having all of the power. They're the ones granting you permission to get on the phone. They're the one who's just so generously donating their time to you. In reality, the best sales relationships stem from a place of equality. If you've got you on one side of the negotiation table and you've got the prospect on the other, the exchange of value, which is going to be your product, is probably going to be equal, if not bigger, than the pile of cash that they're going to exchange with you. So don't ever forget that you and the buyer, right? You and the buyer are equal. So remember to act like it when you're asking your sales questions. The next sales question that you've got to avoid, it's a terrible question to ask, and I still see people asking it as I record this video in 2022, is, hey, can you tell me about what you do? Can you tell me about what you do? This one's a bit tricky because, well, so many people ask it. And it's a weird thing to ask. Maybe 30 years ago, this might have been a decent conversation starter because, everyone likes talking about themselves, right? Especially middle management or C-suite, whoever you're trying to sell into. But the problem here is that this question is a real value suck for the buyer. You, as a salesperson, when you ask this question, can you tell me about what you do? You're the one getting all of the benefit here. The prospect's getting nothing from explaining what they do, what they sell, what their problems are. And although some people do like talking about their business, their time is incredibly precious. So they don't want to waste it explaining what their job is. On top of all of that, asking this question indicates one huge, massive red flag to your prospect. It tells them You just didn't do your research before you called them. Instead, take a minute to look up the profession, the job title, the company's products, the company's customers before you speak to them. Don't ask this question on a sales call or in a sales meeting with a potential customer. Instead, ask some of the value-based questions, like in the video that I've linked below, which is 5 powerful questions that you can ask your prospects. The next question is a simple one, but it sets a strong foundation for a terrible relationship. And the question is, but? So when we say but and our inclination goes up at the end of the word, we're asking a question. That's it. This one little word, that little bit of tonality going up at the very end of the word or the sentence, using this word in sales can lead to massive, massive negative consequences. Simply put, this word is most of the time the start of an argument. And that's tough because this is a verbal slip so tiny that most sales reps don't even realize that they're saying it. They don't give it another thought. But this word, but, and then it being in a question mark at the end and going up in tonality, but is designed to draw contrast. It's acknowledging your buyer's point, what they've said previously, and then going, hey, okay, great, this is why you're wrong. And in the heat of a sales negotiation or presentation, emotions can run high. And when you're talking about money, specifically, both reps and buyers are going to be quicker to react emotionally than in normal conversations. So rather than test the limits of the conversation with the buyer, of the back and forth with this word, but, in the context of following up with, hey, you said this, but I think this instead, I want you to cut it from your vocabulary entirely. Instead, acknowledge the buyer's point and then just move on to your point without drawing a contrast between the two. The next stupid sales question that you should never ask your prospects is, hey, so you're saying you can't afford this? This question is going to tank your chances of getting a deal done. Hey, so you're saying you can't afford this? In the slightly more logical based world of B2B sales, emotions and pride of the prospect are still a huge factor into getting a deal done. And when you frame a question like this, so you're saying you can't afford this, you can't afford this, where you're attributing the budget to the buyer themselves, you're going to get the backs up. You're going to get them on the defensive. And a smaller but just as important point, insulting the company that the prospect works for as a whole with this question, even if it's just implied as opposed to you're saying, hey, your company must be crap because they can't afford our product, clearly is never a good way to do business. Instead of using this question, this stupid selling question, you can try subtler language when trying to determine if price is the biggest obstacle for your buyer. You could say, hey, is price the sticking point here, or do you currently have the budget for this? They're both just as effective ways at qualifying the budget of the buyer, but they're a little bit more soft and less direct than this one. But remember, there is always money. If you're selling to a large company, there is always money. You've just got to work out where the budget has to come from so it can be applied to your product. All right, the final stupid sales question is, when should I call you back to follow up? This one again comes down to a simple reframing to solve it. When should I call you back to follow up? You're putting the fate of the entirety of your follow-up and selling process in the hands of the buyer, and that's a terrible mistake. People forget. They lose track of time, their priorities shift over the course of days or even hours, depending on what level in the organization that you're selling to and how valuable they see your product as when you speak to them. That's why it's so important to close the next step of the process yourself when you speak to the buyer. Don't leave it open-ended and don't let the prospect tell you when you can call. Get the next step of the process, whether it's getting contracts signed, whether it's the next call, whether it's getting a Barry on the phone call for the next meeting, get it in your diary, get it in the prospect's diary, and lay it on a level of social proof so that the prospect commits to it and they don't let you down. The simplest way to do this is by taking a page from our Selling Made Simple Academy's closing framework. Rather than saying, hey, when should I call to follow up with you? Ask the question, hey, does it make sense to jump on another call? The does it make sense to question it's fantastic, it's incredible for solidifying commitment from the buyer. Because the beauty of this question is that if there's an objection, maybe the buyer says, I don't want to jump on another call with you. You follow up with a second question of, hey, what do we need to do then to move this forward? And the buyer will tell you what's stopping them from booking the next call. You solve that objection, then you go and ask the first question again. Hey, does it make sense now to book a call in next week. Dead simple. You just go in this feedback loop round and round. We've got a whole video linked below this one on the closing framework and how you can use it to win more deals. So there are the 5 downright terrible questions that you should never be asking your prospects. Can I give you my sales pitch? Can you tell me about what you do? So you're saying you can't afford this? And then the final terrible sales question, when should I call you back to follow up? In this business of sales, it's all about knowing what to say and also, importantly, what not to say. And if you avoid these 5 questions like grim death, then you're going to be 1 or 5 steps closer to making more sales and boosting your numbers. So there we go. If you enjoyed this video, why not click the video that's on the screen right now and continue making selling simple.